Hi, welcome to Tulsa Welding School. I'm Ryan Egyub, welding instructor at Tulsa Welding School, Jacksonville. Today we're going to be going over a 3-inch heavy wall TIG stick combo. I'm going to show you how to do the root two different ways. One is going to be a walk the cup, which is more of a wiggle the cup. And then on this side, I'll show you more of a free-handed technique. Now, when we do this TIG stick combo, we do the root and the hot pass with TIG. So both hot passes I will do with the walking the cup motion. So again, we're using the scratch start method, which we commonly use here at Tulsa Welding School in Jacksonville. 1/8 inch filler wire, 1/8 inch gap all the way around. And it's the same fit up if you're gonna freehand it. Again, WP17 torch. Cup size on this really varies to your person. For the smaller diameter of pipe, me personally, I prefer to get the biggest cup I can get in there without getting stuck on the bevels. Or walking out of the bevel, I should say. Some people prefer to drop down to a number 4 cup on something small like this. Some guys, they'll run an 8 and they'll be up out of this the whole time. This is a 7, that's what I prefer for most things. My root, about anywhere from 95 to 105 amps. That's a pretty broad range, but it really just depends on the machine and how quickly you move on this root and hot pass. The reason we do the TIG hot pass as well is if we come back over this with 7018 right after the root, there's a good chance we're just going to blow right through it. That's the other thing we'll talk about once we get to the 7018 is how we want to run those first passes of 7018 in this pipe. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to adjust this down a little bit because it's a little bit high for me. So I'll grab my torch here, my gas is on. I like to grab my hose like this and crimp it in my elbow. That way it kind of takes some of the weight off my hand. So when I'm coming along this bevel, I want to keep this tungsten at almost a 45-degree angle to the puddle. I keep the rod in my hand like this and I flex on that rod. And it helps keep the rod in the puddle instead of floating away back here where we don't want it to go. Same thing as always, we're going to come off the side of the cup to start the torch. And we're really just kind of wiggling this cup. We come out of the tack. We want to keep this root as small as possible. Really just hitting both bevels. And the best way to describe this walking the cup method here is a motorcycle throttle. It's really just an up and a down. We're not rolling, we're not rocking the cup. So we come into the tack here. I weld through the tack, pull up through the bevel and snap off. So this is really the appearance we're looking for. It's a nice flat laid in there bead, and on the inside of the pipe it's a nice flush root. 6010 rod is great for roots, but it's quickly going away in today's welding industry because we put these TIG roots in. I mean, there's no slag, there's nothing on the backside. They're just a nice flat laying root. Everything's clean. So again, as you saw, like I said, we want to keep that cup at a 45-degree angle with the tungsten at almost 45-degree angle. We're flexing on that wire to keep it from burning back prematurely before we get into the puddle. So I'll get my wire brush. Again, everything with the TIG process, we want to stay as clean as possible. So we want to stay as clean as possible, everything with the TIG process. Especially on these roots, we always want to start with a fresh end of the wire. So I'll go ahead and snip this off for us. Again, got my hose crimped in my crease of my elbow. And another really important thing on this horizontal is we want to stay out ahead of the cup as we're walking it. If we get to the point where we're right here, we're already behind the cup. We're starting to get in that red zone where we're going to get in trouble. So again, heat up my tack, I bring my wire in. Again, I'm flexing back on that wire, and I'm keeping that root pass nice and tight. I don't want to spread this out too much because I'll get sucked back on the inside of the pipe. So again, as you can see, I'm shuffling my feet around. I'm staying in front of it. So again, just a nice tight little bead. Should lay in there nice and flat, just like that. So the next method I want to show you guys is the freehand technique to putting in this open root. It's a bit more challenging than walking the cup, especially if you're running that 1/8 inch gap. But again, starting with a clean wire is crucial. So again, we'll come here, kind of like we'll go back with the freehand technique. Start with the clean end of the wire, get in position about 1/4 inch back on that tack. I want to get that tack good and hot, that way when I come into it, it all fuses together like one root. So I come back in here, I get my tungsten on the tack, and I introduce my wire now. It's not much different than the walking the cup method. I'm still trying to keep the root nice and tight, but all I'm doing is just bumping the tungsten off of each toe of the bevel and keeping the wire in the leading edge of the puddle. And see, that's where the walking the cup method's a little easier, because as you saw right there, it kind of got hung up and it opened up the keyhole a little bit too much. But if we move quickly, we can always save that from becoming a real big issue. So again, we're coming into the tack. I'll put a dab of wire till it closes up. Then I weld out through my tack. And as you see, the difference in the root, the bead appearance isn't a whole lot different, because it's kind of the same motion. It's just we freehand, we're going up and down, versus we walk the cup, we're going side to side. Go ahead and grab us a fresh piece of wire. All right, so we came off that last tack. We're going to go ahead and finish the final 1/4 of this pipe, put the root in it, and again, this is going to be our freehand side. So again, I'm keeping that tungsten at a good angle, and I'm just bumping up and down. That's my motion. There's not really a pattern to it. It's literally just up and down, just hitting each toe line of the bevel, tying it in. Again, I want this bead to be nice and tight, not too spread out. So again, I'm just staying the wire in that leading edge of the puddle. So let's go over one more thing on this root while we have the chance to do so. Let's talk about doing a restart. As in previous videos, like I said, I'll use my right hand when it's uncomfortable for me to use my left. Breaking that habit of being afraid to use your offhand is a good thing to do in this welding industry. So when we come into our restart, again, I'm using my right hand now to come around the side. And just the same motion, just that little up and down, nice tight bead, tying both of those bevels together. So when I'm coming into my restart, I'm actually going to let that keyhole get a little bit wider. Put one last dab of wire in it, and then I'll break off. So that's our two methods for putting in a root. Both are pretty common. Both are an acceptable way to do so. Again, we'll brush it down. And that's really about the size we're looking for, just nice and tight. I know you guys can't see inside the pipe, but it's nice and sucked in flush. You know, and then so say we did have some rough spots on here, some bumps, or maybe we had to add more wire, because the gaps aren't always going to be perfect. Your fit up's not always going to be perfect. So say we had to put a few dabs of wire here or there to close it up a little bit. If I had that, I'd go ahead and take those high spots and knock them down with my grinder. That way it's easier for me when I walk this cup on my hot pass to come back over it. So I'll go ahead and I'll swap out my tungsten for a fresh side. All right, so we're all brushed off now. Nice clean piece of wire, fresh piece of tungsten. So now we're gonna start with the hot pass. And like I said, we're gonna go ahead and walk the cup. And this is really just the same thing. We're just wiggling down these bevels. We're not really rocking and rolling, so it's the same motion. It's just a motorcycle throttle. I really like to hold my torch in this horizontal up here around the head of it. I feel like I have better control in that aspect. Same thing, good 45-degree angle, tungsten in. And we'll go ahead and we'll get started. Actually, one more thing. So for the fill pass, or the hot pass, we'll bump up to anywhere from 115 to 125. Again, pretty broad range. It's really about how fast you move and what machines you're running on. So again, with the fill pass, I'm keeping it nice and tight. I don't want to spread it out. And with this horizontal, as previously said, we have gravity working against us. So I'm going to keep that filler wire in the top bevel and wash it down. And again, like we talked, we got to keep our feet out in front of us on this horizontal. So me personally, I prefer to just shuffle my left foot and then step with my right. Then again, I'll walk down to the bevel to break off. That's really about the size I'm looking for on this weld. All right, so firing back up off my restart is going to be the same as everything else. I'm going to start back about 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch, depending on how far back you want to start, really. This one here, I'll probably start about 1/4 inch back. Again, holding my rod up on the top bevel, and same little motion, just a little motorcycle throttle. Think about giving your dirt bike more gas. That's all it is. Start it here. Again, we're running anywhere from 115 to 125. I prefer about 120 myself. So I'll get my puddle established. Then I add my filler wire. And again, we want to try to keep this tight. We don't want to overspread this TIG rod because that could cause failures in the weld. Again, like I said, I just like to shuffle my feet around. I don't really like to take too big of steps. The only thing I'm trying to do is stay out in front of this thing. Again, keeping that tungsten at a nice 45-degree angle down. You see my rod's not burning back prematurely on me. Going riding down the bevel on the cup. Again, that's really about the size we're looking for. We're not trying to overstretch this TIG rod. So again, coming into our final stretch here. Start back on the rod. Give it a little motorcycle throttle motion. Rod's back in the puddle. And now we're coming down the home stretch. So again, that's what we're looking for. That's about perfect size for a hot pass for this weld. So that's the TIG portion of this TIG stick combo. I'll now switch over to stick and we'll finish this thing out with 70/18. The smaller pipe, smaller diameter, it's kind of the welder's call at that point. I personally prefer the 3/32 rod for something like this. For one, it's already pretty filled up, so what I'll do is I'll run a 2-bead fill pass and then a 3-bead cap. Some people will try to use the 1/8 inch on it. That's not my preference. I find it easier to run the 3/32. But it can be done both ways. All right, so now we're ready to do the TIG portion of the stick portion of this TIG stick combo. Smaller the pipe, here's a trick an older welder taught me one time. Anything 4 inches or below, I take these 70/18s and I cut them in half. You'll get mixed feelings about that. Some people say, oh, you're wasting the rod. And the reality of it, companies aren't really worried about the rods you're using. They're more worried about the quality of weld you're putting down. So that's the thing I like to do. I like to run my 3/32 around 85, 80 to 90s, really the sweet spot for them. So I'll get my slag saw or my chipping hammer with me. We'll go ahead, we're gonna run a 2-bead fill pass. So I'm gonna stay right here. I'm gonna stay off of this bottom bevel because being that we're in the horizontal position, if I hog up this bevel with this fill bead, my cover bead will cold roll out on me. That's not what we want. So we're gonna go ahead and fire into this. I like to keep my rods a little bit bent. Kind of helps me go around the pipe. And I start with my hands back here and I just roll my wrist over. So a crucial thing when we get to these smaller pipes like 2-inch, 3-inch, 2-inch, something very crucial is that we stay out ahead of that puddle. Because if we don't stay out ahead of it, we can quickly start to push a 70/18. And another thing that I go by, that I was taught, is if it slags, we drag. So anything that makes slag, we don't want to push it. You know, flux core, 70/18s, we don't want to push anything like that. So again, coming into my restart, I'll go ahead, I'll snip my rod down, take my wire snippers, break the flux off, come right back around here. And on this horizontal, our restarts are crucial too. They gotta be crisp, they gotta be clean, nice and smooth tie-ins. So what I'll do is I'll start here, I'll come back on a long, I'll start here, I'll come back on a long arc, I'll draw my J, fill in my crater, and I'm back to the finish line. So again, I'm rolling my wrist around the contour of this pipe to keep that rod from going into a push angle. And just as I say with everything else, as soon as I get uncomfortable, I quit welding. So again, like we said, our restarts have to be nice and smooth, nice and clean on these. We want it to look like a smooth transition, just like that one does right there. And another thing to always keep in mind when welding, I teach my students this all the time, the ABC, always be comfortable. If I'm not comfortable, I can't put a good weld in. And another important thing is your fit up. If you're not fit right, you're not gonna weld right either. So again, just like we talked about that restart, again, rolling my wrist around the contour of the pipe. Get to the point where I can't see, so I go ahead and I break my arc. I'll do 100 restarts before I'll weld uncomfortably because If I can do a restart and I can see nice and clean, I know I'm not pushing that. I know what metal I'm putting into that pipe. So go ahead and I'll snip my rod down, nip off my flux. And I'll run my rods in a variation of the different positions on the stinger. I always do pretty typically bend them like that. I just find it more comfortable when I roll my wrist to have the rod rolling with me. Just kind of a personal preference. So again, on our restart, so now we're good and tied in. So, like we talked about before, the crucial thing to this horizontal or even your 6G is to leave yourself this bevel line. If you overfill this pipe, gravity's already working against us. So what will end up happening is our bottom fill pass will cold roll out, or our bottom cover pass is going to cold roll out on us if we don't leave ourselves that little edge. So again, I'll come back over here. We'll put our second fill pass in. So I went ahead and I nipped my rod down. Again, I always bend in the direction that I plan to roll. Okay. So I'll go ahead and fire up into this. Now this second fill pass, I'll have a little bit of an upward angle on it into that top bevel, because now I'm trying to fill up the remaining of that. I'm not so much worried about taking this the top bevel edge as I am the bottom bevel, because gravity's not really working against me so hard up here as it is down here. So again, I keep my wrist rolling with the contour of the pipe. That is extremely crucial on anything smaller than about 4-inch pipe. The smaller the pipe gets, it really is harder to weld, because you got to figure we start here and we're changing the angle of our hands almost immediately. When we get on, 6-inch or bigger, it's somewhat more of a plate. It's more of a gradual change. Go ahead and we'll brush off. And that's really what I'm looking for. I want to be just sunk in enough under flush. That way on my cap pass, I can come across, slow down. I'm watching both bevel edges as I'm going along, making sure I'm not undercutting anything. Go ahead and nip my rod down. All right, so I got my rod nipped down, we're ready to start. So if you notice that I keep my hands and everything out from underneath this, I got the stinger in my hand, I'm holding my hands open. My biggest thing is I'm not gonna get burnt if I don't have to get burnt. So again, we come into this restart, fire into it, we long arc, we do our J, and then we're right back into the game. Again, my wrists are already starting to roll. That's really what I'm looking for. I want nice, tight overlap on this fill pass. Because in the reality of it, that your fill pass, like on a bend test, your fill pass can really make you or break you. If you got cold roll in your fill pass, if you got lack of fusion, you're gonna have a really tough time passing a bend because it's gonna come apart right there in the middle. Again, we'll go ahead and nip our rod down. Again, got my rod bent in the direction that I plan to roll my wrist. So again, my wrists are rolling with the contour of the pipe. Go ahead and I break my arc. I made my tie-in nice and smooth. Come back. So now I'll go ahead and hit this with my wire wheel right before my cap pass. Really all we're doing with this wire wheel is just maybe getting any piece of, thin slag that we might have missed with the chipping hammer. That's really what I'm shooting for when I cap mine out, is I want a nice open bevel edge. Because like I've stated before in previous videos, it's like drawing. If I can put the first line on there straight, the next one I can follow with it. So I got my rod cut down, I'm getting ready to go into my cap. If I had any high spots or any BBs or anything. Another reason I do the wire wheels, usually knock off little spatter balls or whatever I got on there. But if I had a high spot, I go ahead and I take my thin grinding wheel, maybe an 1/8 inch, even a cutoff wheel if you're careful, and just smooth them down. That way my cap doesn't get all lumpy on me. So on this first bead, I like to go pretty slow, keep my hands nice and straight. Again, always rolling my wrist with the contour of the pipe. I'm really filling that bottom bevel out now. That's why I like to leave mine nice and open, so I can run nice, slow, and smooth on my first bead. Go ahead and cut my rod down, get ready for my restart. Now, on these restarts on the cap, it is crucial that they are nice and clean and smooth because, again, this cap pass is like your signature. I mean, you don't want people to see your final work and be like, man, what was that guy doing? You want people to be like, that looks pretty nice. That guy knows how to weld. So, I want to keep these restarts on this cap very, very smooth and not noticeable. Again, just like everything else I weld, as soon as I get uncomfortable, I'm done welding. I prefer my saw blade over my chipping hammer just because that thin slag up there in between the toe lines, I can really just scrape it off with that instead of having to use a wire wheel every time. And I mean, you can use something as simple as a long sawzall blade. You obviously want to tape up the end and be careful, or put a handle on it like I have on mine. All right, so I got my rod cut, I got my rod bent. Again, restarts on this, crucial to be slick. Again, rolling my wrist with the contour of the pipe. And I'm really keeping my eye on that bottom bevel. I'm making sure I take that edge all the way around. If I miss that bevel edge, almost every welding procedure, if you have a piece of the fabrication line, your bevel edge for say, showing after you turn in your cap, it's usually an automatic failure. Go ahead and we'll knock our slag off. Again, like we were talking, we want our restarts to look like they're basically not even there, like it never happened. Really, another thing I'd like to hit on, I see a lot here with our students, is arc strikes. Arc strikes out in the field are a huge, huge no-no, because you really are damaging that metal in that area you arc struck. So even if you do get an arc strike, you need to at least repair it, grind it off, try to hide it. I see a lot of times people just, I think it's just that they don't understand the severity of an arc strike. So we really do want to either limit those, or if we do get one, we have to repair it, we repair it, or just grind it off. Again, on my cap, I want all of my restarts and my tie-ins to be very smooth. Everything transitions nice and uniform. Don't want anything to look out of place. Like I said, this is like our signature. And when I put my signature on something, I want people to say, wow, you know, he welds pretty good. All right, so now on to our second bead. This will most likely be a 3-bead cap. So on my second bead, I'm going to try to take 50% of this bead here with my overlap and fill up as much of the remaining as I can. So same amperage, same rod, not changing anything. So again, I'm coming around, I'm watching my overlap on that other bead, making sure I keep it even all the way up and down the pipe. And again, I'm trying to get as much of that open joint as I can. Ideally, we always want to try to cap in the least number of beads we have to, but there's nothing that says, you know, if you need a 4th bead on this cap, you can't do it. I mean, there are procedures out there that are written for how many beads the company does want for say on a pipe test. But it's usually if you have to do a 4-bead cap, there's usually not a problem with that. So as you might have noticed, when I do my middle bead on my cap pass, I put like a little circle oscillation to it, almost like a nervous shake. Just kind of helps spread the bead out, and it usually comes out looking pretty good for me. So again, restarts, very crucial. Again, I'm rolling my wrist with the contour of the pipe, not pushing that rod. Keeping it 90 or possibly 5 degrees of a drag. Go ahead and bust our slag off. All right, we're halfway through our second bead on the cap. So again, bending my rod with travel. Same thing, nipped rod, still rolling my wrist. Okay, so we're just about getting done with this cap here. We're almost done with the second bead. Looking like we should be okay to just run a 3-bead cap on this. Go ahead, we'll knock our slag off. Another thing I like to do, depending on, you know, is it a test coupon? Is this an out in the field weld? If it's an out in the field weld, granted, we can't take it to a quench tank. But being that we're in a shop and this is like a test coupon, before I do my final cap bead, I'll take this thing and I'll cool it down. Out in the field, you know, I'll take a break, I'll walk away from it till it comes back and I can touch it. Then I know the pipe's cooled down and I'm not gonna undercut that top. We'll go ahead and finish up our second bead here on the cap. Again, keeping my wrists rolling. Tie-in's got to be smooth, restart's got to be smooth. So we're back fresh from cooling it down. When I do my final cap bead, I like to cut my amps down 2 to 3. So I went from 85 to 82. For me, I feel like it's less of a chance of undercutting. I just like to run it a little bit colder. I always have. So again, on this one, just as I did on my bottom bead, I'm really watching that top toe line. And go ahead and nip my rod down. Got all the slag off, bend my rod with my direction of travel. Again, restart's very important on this 2G. Again, we keep our wrists rolling. That way we're not pushing that rod. Go ahead and grab our brush. All right, we're about halfway through our third bead on this cap pass. Go ahead and fire into our restart, come back, trace our crater. Again, we're keeping our wrists rolling. Go ahead, we'll knock our slag off of this bead here. Go ahead and brush it down. We'll get this third bead finished up. tie-in done. Nice and tight, nice and smooth. Restart came out pretty good. So now this is where our cognitive thought comes in as a welder. We start looking at the top, and I could probably get away with just leaving it 3 beads, but I don't personally like the way it looks. And as we talked about, this cap pass is like our signature. So I'll go ahead and wire wheel this, and I'll end up doing a 4th bead cap. And it'll look just as nice and tight as this one, but what it is it's giving me a security that I know I'm not gonna have any undercut on there. And again, just as we talked before, as welders, we always got to use our brains. We got to have cognitive thought. We got to be able to think on our own. So for me, I can look at this and say, oh, well, there's not really any undercut. You know, my rod slides pretty smooth along there, but I just don't like the way it contours into the pipe. So, as I said before, there's nothing wrong with going ahead and throwing that 4th bead on there. It's going to make it look better. It'll make it look a lot tighter. And that way, you know, if they go shoot this on x-ray or they bend it or whatever, you know you don't have any undercut. So on this bead here, I'm trying to keep pretty tight to my last bead. Again, keeping them wrists rolling. Go ahead and bust this rod down. Grab our wire brush. Brush it down to where we can really see what we're doing here off the restart. Again, bending with my direction of travel. Another thing I always like to check and make sure I do is I like to make sure I'm not standing on my whip, but I also don't want to burn my whip. So I'm not going to put it up here and then pull it onto that hot pipe. But I also don't want to be running along here, running a nice bead, and then bam, I'm standing on my whip. So I always check my surroundings before, and it's very important to do that in the field, to always have your head on a swivel. But it's a good practice to start even in the shop or in your training as a welder at school. Again, as soon as I get uncomfortable, I break the arc. But notice how I'm not getting any arc strikes on the pipe. Because when I'm starting these rods, I'm making sure I got good clean metal out in front of me. I got nothing that's going to hang this rod up or make it spit or spatter too much. And if we do stick a rod, if that first niche of your wrist doesn't break it loose, just open your stinger up. Pull the rod out and start from scratch. Because chances are, if you sit here and you keep fighting it, what you're going to do is break it off and it's going to arc up the pipe. Go ahead again, checking my surroundings, bending my rod with my direction of travel. Do a little dry run. Go ahead and get my pipe all brushed down. All right, we can go ahead and finish up this project. We got the rest of this 4th bead to finish up here, and that'll be the end of that. We can discuss a few more things, and everybody will know how to run out this project. All right, so that concludes the welding portion of this project. We'll go ahead and clean it up, take a look at it, and talk about it. All right, so that concludes our project. As you see here, we went with a 4-bead cap. Everything's real nice and tight. Our overlap looks pretty good, pretty clean, no arc strikes. The wire wheel took off any spatter balls we would have had. You know, no visible porosity that we can see. That's a big thing for me on cover passes, is visible porosity. And a lot of times if you're getting visible porosity right there on your starts and stops, your problem is when you're starting your rod like this instead of at 90 degrees. We start the rod like this, we're blowing all of the shielding for this metal off the back of the pipe, and what we're doing is we're exposing this weld metal to the atmosphere. And that's why we get porosity. So if you're struggling with that, all you gotta do is bring your start back to 90 degrees instead of a severe push angle. But other than that, in closing, I thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you on the next video.
Thank you for watching our video today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something today. If you would like to get some more tips and tricks and become a better welder, then subscribe to our channel. And if you would like to learn even more right now, then click on our link. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.